I'm Lana Garside, 34, and I thought I had the perfect Leafa-loving husband of 8 years, a successful marketing career, and a best friend who'd been by my side since college. Lisa was the one who introduced me to Mark at her birthday party, all those years ago. She was the one who helped me pick out my wedding dress, who held my hand through 2 miscarriages, who assured me just last month that Mark would never stray when I voiced my growing suspicions about his late nights and secretive phone calls. Lana, you're being paranoid, she'd laughed, sipping wine in my kitchen. Mark adores you. He'd never cheat. But yesterday, I found the hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, the same hotel where Lisa's company holds their quarterly meetings, the same dates, the same room numbers on both their expense reports that I'd accidentally seen on her phone. 3 years of receipts. 3 years of lies. The woman who convinced me I was imagining things had been sleeping with my husband since our 5th wedding anniversary. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined possible. But what I discovered next would change everything and reveal the true depth of their deception. If you've ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet when trust shatters, you'll understand what comes next. I keep staring at our wedding photos on the mantelmark's arm around my waist. Both of us beaming at the camera, and Lisa right there, beside me in her dusty rose bridesmaid dress. She'd insisted on that color, said it would complement my skin tone better than the navy I'd originally chosen. Always looking out for me, or so I thought. Lisa introduced us at her 26th birthday party. I was fresh out of a terrible breakup, swearing off men entirely, when she practically dragged me across her apartment to meet the perfect guy for you. Mark was charming, funny, and exactly the kind of stable presence I craved after months of dating disasters. Lisa beamed like a proud matchmaker as we talked for hours that night. I knew you two would hit it off, she'd said, squeezing my hand as Mark walked me to my car. He's one of the good ones, Lana, trust me on this. And I did trust her. Completely. Lisa had been my anchor through college, through my parents' messy divorce, through every crisis and celebration. When Mark proposed 18 months later, she cried harder than I did. She helped me plan every detail of our wedding, from the flowers to the menu to the seating chart. She held my bouquet during the ceremony and gave a toast that had everyone in tears. Lana and Mark are proof that soulmates exist, she'd said, raising her champagne glass. Some people spend their whole lives searching for what these two found in each other. I'm so grateful to have played a small part in bringing them together. The past few months, though something had shifted. Mark became distant, distracted. He'd come home late from work, claiming new projects and demanding clients. His phone was always face down on the table during dinner, and he'd started taking calls in the other room. When I mentioned it to Lisa over coffee, she'd rolled her eyes. Lana, you're being paranoid. Mark adores you, anyone can see that. Maybe he's planning something special? Your anniversary is coming up. But our anniversary came and went with just dinner at home and a hastily purchased gift card to my favorite spa. When I confided my disappointment to Lisa, she had explanations ready. Men don't think about these things the way we do. He probably thought you'd prefer something practical. You know, Mark, he's not the grand gesture type. Every doubt I voiced, she had an answer for. Every instinct I had, she explained away. When I found a receipt for expensive lingerie that wasn't in my size, Lisa laughed it off. Maybe it was for his sister's birthday. Or he's saving it for Christmas. When Mark started going to the gym at odd hours, Lisa nodded approvingly. Good, for him. You're always saying he should take better care of himself. Looking back now, I see how expertly she managed my suspicions, how smoothly she redirected my concerns. She knew exactly what to say to make me doubt myself, to make me feel guilty for questioning Mark's behavior. She was playing both sides, feeding off my trust while enabling his betrayal. The woman who held my hand through 2 miscarriages, who brought me soup when I was sick, who celebrated every promotion and achievement she'd been lying to my face for years. The perfect facade we'd all maintained was built on her deception. And I'd been too trusting, too grateful for her friendship to see the cracks. Now I understand why she always knew exactly what to say. She wasn't guessing at Mark's behavior or making excuses, she was covering her own tracks. I spent the entire night awake, my laptop open on the kitchen table, cross-referencing dates and phone records like a detective building a case. What I found made my stomach turn. Mark's business trips to Chicago lined up perfectly with Lisa's quarterly company meetings there. 3 years of matching travel dates, down to the day. I pulled up our phone records online, something I'd never thought to check before, and there it was in black and white. Hundreds of texts and calls between them, often when Mark was supposedly in client meetings or when Lisa claimed to be working late. The credit card statements were even worse. Mark had been using our joint account to pay for expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, flowers from a florist we'd never used, and charges to Victoria's Secret that certainly weren't for me. One charge from Tiffany's made my hands shake. A $2,400 purchase from last December. I never received any gift from Tiffany's, but it was the Uber receipts that really broke my heart. Shared rides from Mark's office to Lisa's apartment, from her place to hotels downtown, from romantic restaurants back to her building, sometimes 3 times a week. I scrolled through months of rides, each one a timestamp of their deception. The worst part was realizing it had started exactly 3 years ago on our 5th wedding anniversary, while I was at home, cooking his favorite dinner and setting up candles. Excited to celebrate another year together, he was at the Fairmont Hotel with my best friend. The hotel receipt was right there in his wallet that whole evening. He'd kissed me goodnight, told me he loved me, all while her perfume was probably still on his shirt. I found myself remembering that anniversary night differently now. How distracted he'd seemed, how he'd checked his phone during dinner, how he'd claimed to be too tired for the romantic evening I'd planned. I'd felt rejected, undesirable, but Lisa had reassured me the next day. Men get weird about anniversaries, she'd said over lunch. Too much pressure. I'm sure it had nothing to do with you. Of course she knew. She was probably texting him while I was pouring my heart out about feeling unwanted by my own husband. I started recognizing a pattern in their communication. Mark's client dinners always happened on nights when Lisa claimed to be working late on a big project. His guys' weekends coincided with her spa retreats with college friends. Even his sudden interest in fitness made sense now. Lisa had joined a new gym 6 months ago and was constantly posting about her workout routines. The phone records showed they'd talked for hours some nights, usually after I'd gone to bed. I remembered Mark's late-night calls, how he'd step outside or go to his office, claiming it was work emergencies. The conversations lasted 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes longer. What kind of work emergency required that much discussion? At midnight, I pulled up Lisa's social media and began scrolling with new eyes. Her posts about girls' nights and solo adventures took on a different meaning. The expensive jewelry she'd been wearing lately, the designer handbags, the weekend trips to wine country, all funded by my husband, paid for with money from my promotions and bonuses. There was even a photo from last month of her wearing a necklace I'd never seen before, captioned "treating myself because I deserve it." The comments were full of friends asking where she got it, complimenting her taste. I recognized the style. It was from the same Tiffany's collection as the mysterious $2,400 charge. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Coffee later. You seemed stressed yesterday and I want to make sure you're okay." I stared at the message, fury building in my chest. Even now, she was monitoring me, managing my emotions, making sure I didn't suspect too much. The concerned best friend act was just another layer of manipulation. I typed back, "Can't today, working late." Let her wonder for once. Let her worry about what I might be discovering. I found the friendship bracelet in my jewelry box while looking for my grandmother's earrings. Lisa and I had made them during our sophomore year of college, braiding embroidery thread in our dorm room while complaining about finals. Hers was blue and silver, mine was pink and gold. We'd sworn we'd wear them forever, symbols of our unbreakable bond. I hadn't worn mine in months, but seeing it now made me remember how Lisa had been there for everything. When I lost my first pregnancy at 12 weeks, she'd driven 3 hours from her new job to hold me while I cried. She'd brought groceries, cleaned my house, and fielded calls from well-meaning relatives when I couldn't face talking to anyone. "You don't have to be strong for everyone," she'd whispered, stroking my hair. "I've got you." When it happened again, 8 months later, Lisa took a week off work to stay with me. She'd made sure I ate, forced me to shower, and listened to me rage against the unfairness of it all. She'd even come with me to the support group meetings, sitting quietly in the circle while I struggled to find words for my grief. "Some women aren't meant to be mothers," the group leader had said gently. "Perhaps your path lies elsewhere." Lisa had squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Afterward, in her car, she'd turned to me with fierce determination. "That woman is wrong. You're going to be an amazing mother someday, Lana. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But now I wonder if she really meant it, or if she was already planning to take that possibility away from me too. Because those were the months when Mark And I grew closest when our shared grief bonded us in ways I thought were unbreakable. Those were the months when Lisa watched us lean on each other, watched our marriage deepen through tragedy. Was she jealous even then? Did she see our pain as something that excluded her, something she couldn't share or understand? I remember how she'd sometimes seem distant during those visits. How she'd suggest Mark should give me space to grieve, or that maybe I was leaning on him too much. Men process these things differently, she'd say. Maybe he needs time to work through his own feelings without having to take care of you too. At the time, I thought she was looking out for Mark, making sure I wasn't being too needy or demanding. Now I see it differently. She was creating space between us. Little cracks she could wedge herself into later. The conversations we had during those dark months came back to me with startling clarity. How Lisa would ask detailed questions about Mark's reactions, his moods, his way of handling stress. How she'd nod sympathetically when I described his quiet periods or his need to work late to process things. He's lucky to have someone who understands him so well, she'd say. Not every woman would be so patient with a man who withdraws when he's hurting. She was studying him, learning his patterns, figuring out how to position herself as the opposite of what frustrated me. If I complained that Mark was too quiet, she'd praise his thoughtfulness. If I wished he were more spontaneous, she'd talk about how much she valued reliable, steady men. Looking back, I can see how she used my most vulnerable moments to gather intelligence. Every confession I made about our marriage, every doubt I shared, every moment of weakness, she filed it all away to use later. The woman who held my hand through miscarriages was already planning to destroy the family I dreamed of building. The friendship bracelet felt heavy in my hands. A reminder of how completely I'd trusted her, how utterly she'd betrayed that trust. The bank statements told a story I'd been too trusting to read. 3 months ago, I'd gotten a significant promotion with a $20,000 salary increase. Mark had been so proud, taking me out to celebrate, talking about how we could finally start saving seriously for a house. Maybe take that European vacation we'd been dreaming about. What he didn't mention was that he'd already spent my raise on Lisa. I traced the timeline with growing nausea. Within 2 weeks of my promotion being announced, there was a $5,000 transfer from our joint savings to Mark's personal checking account. When I'd asked about it, he'd claimed it was for a surprise he was planning. I'd felt a flutter of excitement, imagining romantic getaways, or maybe finally the fertility treatments we'd discussed. Instead, that money went to pay for Lisa's security deposit on a new apartment. Her lease was under her name, but the payment came from our account. My promotion had literally funded her upgrade to a luxury building downtown, complete with a gym, rooftop deck, and parking garage where Mark could come and go without being seen. The monthly payments kept coming: rent, utilities, even her car payment, all disguised as business expenses or mysterious transfers that Mark claimed were investments. When I'd questioned them, he'd gotten defensive. Do you want to micromanage every dollar I spend? I thought we trusted each other with money. The guilt had worked perfectly. I'd backed down, ashamed of seeming controlling or suspicious. Meanwhile, he was using my own money to maintain his mistress in style. The credit card statements were even more insulting. Designer clothes charges that coincided with Lisa's Instagram posts of new outfits, expensive dinners at restaurants that she'd tag herself at, pretending to be there with clients or girlfriends, weekend trips that she'd document as solo adventures, while Mark claimed to be at work conferences. One charge particularly stung: a $1,000 payment to a fertility clinic. Not for MI, would have known about that. When I called to inquire, they couldn't give me details due to privacy laws, but they could confirm that the payment wasn't for any treatments under my name. Lisa had been having fertility treatments with my husband while I mourned my inability to carry their child. The irony was so cruel it took my breath away. She was trying to get pregnant with the man I'd married, using money from the job promotion I'd worked 12-hour days to earn. I thought about all the times I'd confided in Lisa about wanting children, about feeling broken and inadequate after the miscarriages, how she'd comforted me, telling me it would happen when the time was right, that some things were just meant to be. All while she was actively trying to make it happen with my husband. The laptop receipt from 6 months ago finally made sense. 2. Mark had claimed he needed a new computer for work, but I'd never seen him use it. Now I realized it was a gift for Lisa. Her old laptop had been giving her trouble, and she'd mentioned needing an upgrade for her graphic design freelancing. Even our joint investments had been compromised. Mark had cashed out a mutual fund worth $15,000, claiming it was to diversify our portfolio. In reality, he'd used the money to fund a romantic trip to Paris for him and Lisa. She'd posted pictures of the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, claiming it was a solo journey of self-discovery after a difficult breakup. What breakup? She'd been seeing my husband for 3 years. The total came to over $40,000. My raises, my bonuses, my careful savings all used to finance their relationship while I lived in ignorance. Grateful for Mark's financial responsibility and Lisa's friendship. They'd stolen more than my money. They'd stolen my dreams, my future, my ability to trust my own instincts about the people closest to me. I'd always wondered why our mutual friends had seemed distant lately. Coffee dates canceled at the last minute, group texts that went quiet when I joined them, invitations that somehow never reached me. I'd mentioned it to Mark, who'd brushed it off as people being busy with their own lives. But scrolling through my phone, looking at old group chats with fresh eyes, I saw the manipulation. Clearly, Lisa had been systematically poisoning my friendships, one conversation at a time. In our college group chat from 6 months ago, I found a conversation that happened while I was asleep. Lisa had written, "I'm really worried about Lana. She's been so paranoid about Mark lately, accusing him of things that just aren't true. I think the miscarriages affected her more than she's admitting." Jessica had responded with concern. "Should we say something? Maybe suggest therapy?" "I've tried," Lisa had replied. "But she gets defensive. I think she's struggling with depression and taking it out on Mark. He's being so patient with her, but I can see it's wearing on him." My hands were shaking as I read their responses. Our friends, women who'd known me for over a decade, discussing my mental health like I was fragile, unstable, someone to be managed rather than trusted. Lisa had painted me as the problem in my own marriage, the paranoid wife who was driving away a good man with unfounded suspicions. Further back in the messages, I found more examples. Lisa sharing concerns about my drinking. I'd had 2 glasses of wine at dinner, or my obsession with having children. She'd turned my grief into a character flaw, my pain into proof of instability. "Lana keeps bringing up the baby thing," she'd written after a group dinner where I'd mentioned seeing a pregnancy announcement on social media. "I feel like she can't be happy for other people anymore. It's getting uncomfortable." No wonder our friends had started inviting me to fewer events. Lisa had made me sound bitter, jealous, someone who brought down the mood with my issues. She'd carefully crafted a narrative where I was the difficult friend, the one who needed handling rather than support. The cruelest part was how she'd positioned herself as my loyal defender, the friend who was trying so hard to help me through a difficult time. In response to someone suggesting they should distance themselves from my negativity, Lisa had written, "No, Lana needs us right now. She doesn't mean to be this way. We have to be patient with her." It was masterful manipulation. She'd made herself look like a saint while making me look unstable, ensuring that any concerns I might raise about her behavior would be dismissed as more evidence of my paranoia. If I'd tried to tell our friends about the affair, they'd already been primed to see it as another delusion from poor, troubled Lana. I realized I'd been isolated for months without even knowing it. The friends who used to text me regularly, who'd invite me to spontaneous plans, who'd been my support system through college and early adulthood, they'd all been convinced I was the problem. Lisa had effectively cut me off from my community, while positioning herself as my only true friend. The loneliness I'd been feeling wasn't imaginary. I really had been abandoned, just not for the reasons I'd thought. It wasn't because I was difficult or demanding, it was because Lisa had systematically destroyed my reputation to protect her secret. I sat in the private investigator's office, feeling like a character in a movie I'd never wanted to audition for. Janet Morris came highly recommended by my lawyer's officer, former police detective who specialized in marital cases. Her office was professional but warm, with certificates on the walls and a box of tissues strategically placed on her desk. "I know this is difficult," Janet said, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact, "but if you're considering divorce proceedings, you'll want documentation. Emotions run high in these situations, and concrete evidence protects everyone involved." I'd brought copies of everything: bank statements, phone records, credit card bills, hotel receipts. Janet spread them across her desk like pieces of a puzzle, nodding as she reviewed the timeline. "This is very thorough work," she said. "You have strong financial evidence of the affair. What we need now are photographs, video evidence, and witness testimony. Something that clearly establishes the physical relationship." The word physical made my stomach clench. I knew intellectually that Mark and Lisa were sleeping together, but having it spelled out so clinically made it real in a way that hurt, all over again. How long will it take? I asked. Based on the patterns you've shown me, probably 2 weeks, maybe less if they maintain their regular schedule. Janet explained the process. Surveillance during their typical meeting times. Photographs of them entering and leaving hotels together. Documentation of their public displays of affection. She'd focus on the upcoming quarterly meeting Lisa had mentioned, another Chicago trip that was supposedly just for work. I have to ask, Janet said carefully, are you sure you want to see these photos? Some people prefer to just know that evidence exists without reviewing it personally. I thought about that. Did I want to see images of my husband kissing another woman? Of him looking at Lisa the way he used to look at me? But then I remembered all the times I'd doubted myself, all the times Lisa had made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. I need to see them, I said. I need to know I wasn't imagining things. Janet nodded with understanding. Many of my clients say the same thing. The gaslighting that happens in these situations can be as damaging as the affair itself. While we waited for the surveillance results, Janet connected me with a divorce attorney. Margaret Chen specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for thorough preparation and fair settlements. The financial evidence you've gathered is excellent, Margaret told me during our consultation. We can make a strong case for separate property claims and potentially recover some of the money spent on the affair. The challenge will be if they claim the relationship started after you separated, but your documentation timeline disputes that. 3 days later, Janet called. I have what you need, she said simply. The photos were worse than I'd imagined, and exactly what I'd expected. Mark and Lisa entering the Palmer House Hotel together, his hand on her lower back in a gesture I recognized as intimate. Lisa laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. Mark kissing her forehead as they waited for a taxi. The same protective gesture he'd used with me during our early dating days. But it was the video that broke my heart completely. 30 seconds of footage showing them on the hotel balcony. Mark's arms wrapped around Lisa from behind as they looked out at the Chicago skyline. They looked happy, content, like a couple in love enjoying a romantic getaway. The timestamp showed it was taken last month, during what Mark had told me was a boring client conference where he'd be stuck in meetings all day. I'm sorry, Janet said quietly. I know this can't be easy to see. I stared at the images, feeling strangely detached. These people looked like strangers wearing the faces of my husband and best friend. The Mark in these photos was relaxed, affectionate, present in a way he hadn't been with me in months. The Lisa in the images was radiant, confident, nothing like the concerned friend who'd been worried about my paranoia. No, I said finally. I'm not sorry I saw them. Now I know I wasn't crazy. Now I have proof. With Janet's evidence and Margaret's legal strategy, I finally had the tools I needed to confront the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. I spent hours at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, mapping out my strategy like a general planning a campaign. The evidence was damning, but I needed to think carefully about how to use it. One chance to get this right, one opportunity to ensure that the truth came out in a way that couldn't be spun or explained away. The invitation to Lisa's promotion celebration had arrived 2 days after I received Janet's photos. Senior art director at Morrison & Associates, a position she'd been angling for since college. The party was scheduled for next Friday at a trendy downtown restaurant, with colleagues, friends, and family invited to celebrate her achievement. It was perfect. A room full of people who knew both of us, who'd watched our friendship over the years, who'd heard Lisa's version of events about my paranoia and Mark's patience. They'd all be there to witness the truth. My plan was methodical. I'd arrive early and distribute sealed envelopes to key people: Lisa's boss, her closest work colleagues, our mutual friends who'd been turned against me. Each envelope would contain copies of the hotel receipts, bank transfers, and selected photographs. Not everything. I wasn't trying to humiliate them completely, but enough to make the situation undeniably clear. Then I'd wait. Let Lisa make her speech about hard work and dedication, about the support of family and friends. Let her thank everyone for believing in her, for standing by her through challenging times. Let her enjoy the applause and congratulations. And then I'd stand up and make a toast of my own. The moral weight of what I was planning sat heavily on my shoulders. Was this justice or revenge? Was I protecting other women from Lisa's manipulation, or was I just lashing out from a place of hurt? I wrote down my motivations, trying to untangle my feelings. Justice. People deserved to know who Lisa really was, Her promotion was built partly on the sympathy she'd garnered by portraying me as unstable while positioning herself as the loyal friend. Dealing with a difficult situation, protection. If Lisa could lie and manipulate so completely in personal relationships, what did that say about her integrity in professional ones? Truth. I was tired of being painted as paranoid and jealous, when my instincts had been right all along. But underneath those rational justifications, I knew there was something else. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the humiliation I'd experienced. I wanted Lisa to know what it felt like to have her reputation questioned, her character examined, her explanations doubted. I called my sister Emma to talk through the plan. She'd never liked Lisa, always said there was something performative about her friendship with me. "Are you sure about doing this so publicly?" Emma asked. "What if it backfires? What if people think you're being vindictive?" "Let them think what they want," I said. "I have proof. I have documentation. I'm not making accusations, I'm presenting facts." "And Mark, what about confronting him?" That was the part I was still working through. Mark's betrayal hurt deeply, but it was Lisa's manipulation that felt more personal, more calculated. Mark had made a terrible choice, but Lisa had orchestrated an elaborate deception that extended far beyond their affair. "Mark will get his confrontation," I said. "But Lisa first. She's the one who convinced everyone I was imagining things. She's the one who isolated me from our friends. She gets to face the consequences of that manipulation." The night before the party, I sat with my legal pad and wrote out exactly what I wanted to say. Not a long speech, just enough to make it clear that I knew the truth and had evidence to support it. I practiced in the mirror until the words felt steady, until my voice didn't shake with emotion. This wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming my voice, my truth, my right to be believed. The text from Rachel, Mark's younger sister, came 2 days before Lisa's party. "Can we talk? It's about Mark. Something's not right." I'd always liked Rachel, but we'd never been particularly close. She was 5 years younger than Mark, a veterinarian with a busy practice and little patience for drama. If she was reaching out, it meant she'd noticed something significant. We met at a coffee shop near her clinic during her lunch break. Rachel looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her car keys as she sat down across from me. "I don't know how to say this," she began, "but I think Mark is cheating on you." The relief that flooded through me was unexpected. Someone else had seen it. Someone else knew I wasn't imagining things. "What makes you think that?" I asked carefully. "He's been different. 4 months. Secretive. Distracted. Last week at Mom's birthday dinner, his phone kept buzzing and he was texting under the table like a teenager. When I teased him about it, he got defensive, said it was work." Rachel paused, choosing her words carefully. "But then I saw him last weekend at North Point Mall with a woman. They weren't just shopping together, Lana, they were intimate. Holding hands, kissing. She was picking out jewelry and he was paying for it." "What did she look like?" I asked, though I already knew. "Tall, blonde, really put together, pretty." I didn't recognize her, but she seemed comfortable with him, like they'd been together for a while. Lisa, even Mark's sister, had witnessed their relationship, had seen them behaving like a couple in public while I was at home, oblivious. "I've been struggling with whether to tell you," Rachel continued. "I know it would destroy you, but I also couldn't stand the thought of you not knowing. You deserve better than this." I thanked Rachel for her courage in speaking up, and then I made a decision. I told her everything, the evidence I'd gathered, the private investigator's photos, the upcoming confrontation at Lisa's party. Rachel's reaction surprised me. Instead of shock or attempts to talk me out of it, she nodded grimly. "Good," she said. "Mom and Dad have been worried about Mark's behavior too. They think he's having some kind of midlife crisis. This explains a lot." "Would they support me if this goes public?" I asked. "Are you kidding? Mom loves you more than she loves Mark sometimes. She's been planning to give you her grandmother's engagement ring when you have a daughter. If she finds out what he's done, double quotes, Rachel shook her head. "You'll have their full support." Over the next day, other allies emerged. Mark's college roommate Dave called to say he'd been concerned about Mark's secretiveness during their recent golf games. Our neighbor Mrs. Patterson mentioned she'd noticed a blonde woman visiting our house when I wasn't home. She'd assumed it was a realtor or contractor. Even my former colleague Jennifer, who'd left our company 6 months ago, reached out after hearing through mutual connections that I might be going through a difficult time. "I should have said something earlier," Jennifer told me over the phone. But I saw Mark at that new sushi place downtown with someone who wasn't you. I wasn't sure if you two were separated or if it was innocent, so I didn't want to cause trouble. Each conversation reinforced what I was beginning to understand. Other people had noticed signs of the affair. They'd seen Mark's behavior changes, Lisa's expensive new lifestyle, the inconsistencies in their stories. But social conventions had prevented them from speaking up, the same way my trust in Lisa had prevented me from listening to my own instincts. The isolation I'd felt wasn't real. There were people who cared about me, who'd been concerned about my well-being, who were willing to support me when the truth came out. Lisa's manipulation had been effective, but it hadn't been complete. Rachel's final words before we parted gave me the confidence I needed. "You're not alone in this, Lana, and you're definitely not crazy." The invitation to Lisa's promotion celebration sat on my dresser all week, cream cardstock with elegant gold lettering. Join us in celebrating Lisa Chin's promotion to Senior Art Director at Morrison & Associates. Friday, November 15th, 7:00 p.m., the Meridian Restaurant. I'd RSVP'd, yes, 3 days ago, my hands shaking as I clicked send on the email. Lisa had texted immediately, "So excited you're coming. It means the world to have my best friend there for this milestone." My best friend. The phrase tasted bitter now. I spent Friday afternoon preparing with the methodical precision of someone getting ready for battle. I'd printed 30 copies of the evidence packet, not the intimate photographs, but the financial records, hotel receipts, and phone logs that painted an undeniable picture. Each packet was sealed in a manila envelope with a person's name written in my careful handwriting. My black dress was professional but not somber, my makeup flawless but not overdone. I needed to look composed, credible, like someone whose words should be taken seriously rather than dismissed as the ravings of a jealous wife. Rachel had agreed to be there for moral support, positioned near the bar where she could intervene if things got out of hand. My lawyer Margaret was on standby, and Janet, the private investigator, had assured me that all the evidence was legally obtained and could be used in court if necessary. I arrived at the Meridian at 6:45, 15 minutes before the official start time. The restaurant was elegant, with exposed brick walls and warm lighting that made everyone look their best. Lisa had chosen well the kind of place that suggested success and sophistication. The hostess directed me to the private dining room where about 40 people were already mingling. I recognized most of them, Lisa's colleagues from Morrison & Associates, our college friends, some neighbors, and various family members. Mark wasn't there yet, which gave me time to distribute the envelopes. I started with Lisa's boss, David Morrison, a distinguished man in his 50s who'd always been polite but distant at company events. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Lana Mitchell, Lisa's friend. Could I give you something to review when you have a moment? It's important information that relates to Lisa's character and professional integrity." He looked puzzled but accepted the envelope, tucking it into his jacket pocket. I moved through the room systematically. Lisa's department colleagues, her supervisor from the account management team, the HR director who'd been involved in the promotion decision. Our mutual friends were harder to approach. Jessica and Amanda were standing together near the appetizer table, laughing about something on Jessica's phone. When I handed them their envelopes, they looked confused. "What's this?" Jessica asked. "Information you should have before you hear Lisa's speech tonight," I said simply. "Please read it before the toasts begin." I was placing the final envelope on the gift table when Lisa arrived. She swept into the room like a movie star, wearing a stunning red dress that I now realized had probably been purchased with my money. She was radiant, confident, completely in her element. "Lana." She rushed over to hug me, and I forced myself not to recoil from her touch. "You look amazing. Thank you so much for being here. This night is perfect." "It certainly will be memorable," I replied, managing a smile. Mark appeared a few minutes later, and my stomach clenched at the sight of him. He looked handsome in his navy suit, relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. When he spotted Lisa across the room, his entire face lit up before he caught himself and schooled his expression back to neutral. The performance was flawless. They barely looked at each other, certainly never spoke directly, maintained perfect plausible deniability. If I didn't know better, I might have believed they were just acquaintances celebrating a mutual friend's success, but I did know better. And in about an hour, so would everyone else. The dinner conversation flowed around me like background noise as I watched people discreetly opening their envelopes. David Morrison's expression shifted from polite interest to serious concern as He reviewed the financial documents. Jessica's face went pale as she read, her eyes darting between the papers and Lisa, who was holding court at the head table. Lisa's speech began at 8:30. She stood gracefully, tapping her champagne glass to get everyone's attention. The room quieted, faces turning toward her with warm smiles and expectant expressions. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Lisa began, her voice clear and confident. "This promotion means more to me than you could possibly know. It represents years of hard work, dedication, and the support of incredible people." She gestured toward her colleagues. "To my team at Morrison & Associates, thank you for pushing me to be better every day. To my family, thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Her eyes found mine across the room. "And to my dearest friends, especially Lana, who has been my rock through every challenge and celebration. True friendship is rare, and I'm so grateful to have people in my life who've stood by me no matter what." The irony was breathtaking. Even now, even in this moment, she was using our friendship as a prop in her performance. The room erupted in gentle applause, and several people glanced at me with warm smiles, probably thinking how lucky Lisa was to have such a loyal friend. "This promotion isn't just about professional achievement," Lisa continued. "It's about integrity, about earning trust, about being the kind of person others can depend on. I promise to honor that trust and continue growing into the leader I aspire to be." I waited until the applause died down completely. Then I stood. "I'd like to make a toast as well," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. The surprise on Lisa's face was almost comical. This wasn't part of her script. "Of course," she said, recovering quickly. "Lana always has the most thoughtful words." I raised my glass, looking around the room at faces that ranged from curious to concerned. Several people were still holding their evidence packets, pieces of paper visible in their hands. "To Lisa," I began, "who taught me so much about trust and integrity. Lisa, you've been such an important part of my life for so many years. You were there for my wedding, you supported me through difficult times, and you gave me advice about my marriage that I'll never forget." Lisa smiled, but something in her eyes had shifted. She could sense the undercurrent in my words. "You told me just last month that Mark would never cheat on me. You said I was being paranoid, that I should trust my husband more. You were so convincing, so concerned about my mental state." The room was completely silent now. I could see David Morrison's jaw tighten as he connected the dots. "It turns out, you were right about one thing, Lisa. I was being paranoid. But not about Mark cheating, about whether my best friend would ever betray me so completely." Lisa's face went white. "Lana, what are you?" "The evidence packets many of you are holding contain documentation of a 3-year affair between Lisa and my husband Mark. Hotel receipts, financial records, photographs from a private investigator. Lisa has been sleeping with Mark since our 5th wedding anniversary while convincing me that my suspicions were signs of mental instability." The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then the whispers started, papers rustling as people pulled out documents to examine them more closely. "Lana, this is," Lisa started, but I held up my hand. "The financial records show that my own salary increases and bonuses were used to fund their relationship. My promotion money paid for Lisa's apartment, her jewelry, their romantic trips. While I struggled with infertility, they were visiting fertility clinics together." Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking at the papers in her hand. "Lana, we had no idea. Lisa told us you were going through depression, being paranoid, making Mark's life difficult with unfounded accusations." I looked directly at Lisa, who was standing frozen at the head table. "Yes, I know what she told you. It's all documented in your group chat messages." Mark appeared at my elbow, his face flushed with panic and anger. "Lana, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I turned to face him, surprised by how calm I felt. "Or am I finally telling the truth after years of being gaslighted by both of you?" The room erupted in murmurs and shocked conversations. David Morrison was speaking quietly but urgently, with the HR director. Lisa's parents looked confused and mortified. Our college friends were staring at Lisa with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. "The woman you're celebrating tonight," I said, raising my voice to address the room, "systematically destroyed my reputation among our mutual friends to cover up her affair. She used intimate knowledge gained from our friendship to manipulate my marriage and isolate me from my support system. This promotion party seemed like the perfect venue to celebrate her true talents. Lisa finally found her voice. "You're sick, Lana. This is a breakdown. Everyone can see that." But the evidence spoke louder than her protests. Around the room, people were comparing notes, examining documents, putting together pieces they'd missed. The narrative Lisa had carefully constructed was crumbling in real time. "I think," said David Morrison, standing up with quiet authority, "this party is over." The restaurant emptied quickly after David Morrison's announcement. People gathered their belongings and filed out in small groups, speaking in hushed tones, and avoiding eye contact with Lisa, Mark, and me. The festive atmosphere had evaporated completely, replaced by the uncomfortable tension that follows public humiliation. Lisa stood at the head table like a statue, her face cycling through emotions: shock, anger, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like relief. The performance was finally over. She no longer had to pretend to be my concerned best friend or maintain the elaborate web of lies that had sustained her double life. Mark approached me as I gathered my purse, his voice low and urgent. "Lana, we need to talk. This is insane. You can't what?" I interrupted. "Can't tell the truth. Can't show people evidence of what you've been doing. Can't stop pretending that I'm the problem in our marriage. You've destroyed everything," he hissed. "Lisa's career, our marriage, our friendships. I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "I revealed what was already destroyed. There's a difference." Rachel appeared at my side, having watched the entire confrontation from her position near the bar. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. The anticipation had been worse than the actual event. Now that the truth was out, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Lisa's resignation letter was submitted to Morrison and Associates by email before I even got home that night. The HR director had made it clear during a brief, tense conversation in the restaurant's parking lot that her position with the company was no longer tenable. The evidence I'd presented raised serious questions about her judgment and integrity, particularly given that client funds and company resources might have been involved in covering up the affair. "We'll need to conduct a full investigation," David Morrison had told her quietly. "But I think we both know what the outcome will be." Lisa's professional reputation in our mid-sized city was effectively destroyed overnight. The marketing and advertising community was tight-knit, and news of the scandal spread quickly through industry networks. By Monday morning, she'd also lost 2 major freelance clients who'd learned about the situation through mutual connections. The personal fallout was equally swift. Our college friends rallied around me with apologies and support, mortified that they'd believed Lisa's manipulation and turned away from me when I needed them most. Jessica called Sunday morning in tears. "Lana, I'm so sorry. We should have trusted you. We should have seen what she was doing." "How could you have known?" I asked. "She was convincing because she used real information about our friendship. You had no reason to suspect her motives." But privately, I was still hurt by how easily they'd been turned against me. It would take time to rebuild those relationships, if it was even possible. Mark's family was unequivocal in their support for me. His parents called Saturday morning, his mother crying as she apologized for her son's behavior. "We raised him better than this," she said. "We're so disappointed in him, Lana. You'll always be family to us, no matter what happens with the divorce." The strangest part was the emptiness I felt after the initial adrenaline wore off. I'd spent weeks planning the confrontation, imagining how it would feel to expose their betrayal publicly. I'd expected satisfaction, vindication, a sense of justice served. Instead, I felt hollow. The marriage I'd thought was real had never existed. The friendship I'd treasured had been a performance. The life I'd been living had been built on lies so fundamental that I questioned my ability to trust my own judgment about anything. But underneath the sadness and confusion, there was something else growing: determination. I'd survived their deception and manipulation. I'd found the courage to speak my truth, even when it was difficult and painful. Now I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't being lied to, manipulated, or controlled. Margaret Chin's law office became my second home over the following weeks. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once we had documented evidence of Mark's adultery and financial misconduct. Illinois was a no-fault divorce state, but the financial evidence we'd gathered strengthened our position significantly in asset division negotiations. "The key issue," Margaret explained during one of our meetings, "is proving that marital funds were used to support the affair. We have clear documentation of money transferred from joint accounts to pay for Lisa's living expenses, gifts, and travel. That's considered dissipation of marital assets. The numbers were staggering when laid out in legal documents. Over 3 years, Mark had spent approximately $68,000 of our joint money on Lisa and their relationship. Money that should have gone toward our retirement savings, the house fund we'd been building, or the fertility treatments I'd wanted to pursue. We can seek reimbursement for half of that amount, Margaret continued. $34,000 that should be returned to the marital estate before we divide assets. Mark's lawyer, a nervous man named Robert Finch, tried to argue that the money was spent on legitimate business expenses or gifts that benefited the marriage somehow, but the evidence was too detailed, too specific. Hotel receipts with romantic charges, jewelry purchases that never made it home to me, rent payments for an apartment I'd never seen, none of it could be explained away as marital expenditures. The house was our most significant asset, and I had several options. I could buy out Mark's share and keep it, we could sell it and split the proceeds, or Mark could buy out my share if he wanted to stay. The irony wasn't lost on me that the home, where I'd been so systematically deceived, might soon belong entirely to me. I want to sell it, I told Margaret. I can't live there anymore knowing what I know. Every room has memories of him lying to me, of Lisa visiting while I was at work. I need a fresh start. The restraining order was Margaret's suggestion after Mark showed up at my workplace 3 times in 1 week, demanding that we talk things through rationally. His version of rational discussion involved convincing me to drop the divorce proceedings and seek marriage counseling instead. He's not accepting that the marriage is over, Margaret observed. The restraining order will give you legal protection and make it clear that contact needs to go through our offices. Lisa faced her own legal challenges. The investigation at Morrison & Associates revealed that she'd used company credit cards for personal expenses on several occasions, including charges that were later reimbursed by Mark through various complicated arrangements. While the amounts weren't large enough to constitute major embezzlement, they were sufficient to prevent her from finding work at any reputable agency in the city. More seriously, Lisa's landlord was pursuing her for back rent after Mark stopped making payments on her apartment. Without her job or his financial support, she couldn't maintain the lifestyle that had been funded by our marriage. She'd moved back in with her parents and was reportedly struggling to find work in her field. There's something else, Margaret said during one of our final meetings about the financial settlement. Lisa's been trying to contact several of your mutual friends, apparently asking for loans or financial support. According to Jessica, she's claiming this whole situation has been blown out of proportion and that you've ruined her life over a mistake. The audacity was breathtaking, but also somehow predictable. Even facing the consequences of her choices, Lisa was still trying to manipulate the narrative, still positioning herself as the victim rather than the architect of her own downfall. The final divorce decree was signed on a gray Tuesday morning in February. Mark looked haggard in the courtroom, older somehow than his 36 years. He'd lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. When the judge declared our marriage officially dissolved, I felt nothing but relief. I found the college yearbook while packing up the house for sale. It had been tucked away in a box in our basement, forgotten among other memorabilia from our early 20s. Flipping through the pages brought back memories of simpler times, but also shed new light on patterns I'd been too naive to recognize. Back then, there was Lisa in the drama club photos, always positioned prominently in the front row. Lisa at the spring formal, wearing a dress that was obviously expensive while the rest of us made do with budget finds. Lisa at our graduation party, her smile bright but her eyes focused on something beyond the camera or someone. I studied the photos more carefully, looking for clues I'd missed the first time. In picture after picture, Lisa was watching other people's happiness with an expression I now recognized as calculating rather than joyful. At my 21st birthday party, she stood slightly apart from the group, observing rather than participating. At Jessica's engagement celebration, she smiled for the camera but her body language suggested distance. Detachment. The most telling photo was from our junior year, taken at a party I barely remembered. Lisa was in the background, but her face was clearly visible, and she was staring at me with an expression of pure resentment. I was laughing at something my then-boyfriend had said, completely unaware of her scrutiny. Even then, she'd been watching, cataloging, perhaps planning. I called Jessica, who was still processing her own guilt about believing Lisa's manipulation. Jess, do you remember Lisa being jealous or competitive in college? I'm looking at old photos and seeing things differently now. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. You know, there were things. Like how she always had to one-up whatever good news you had. When you got that internship at the design firm, she suddenly announced she was applying for an even better one in Chicago. When you started dating David's senior year, she immediately got involved with that graduate student, who was obviously more successful. More memories surfaced as we talked. Lisa's habit of undermining my confidence with backhanded compliments. Her tendency to share my insecurities with others under the guise of concern. The way she'd position herself as the more responsible, more mature friend when talking to professors or potential employers. She was always performing. Jessica said slowly, I thought it was just her personality, you know, dramatic, attention-seeking, but maybe it was more calculated than that. I realized that the affair with Mark wasn't really about Mark at all. It was about destroying something I valued, something that made me happy. Lisa had spent years watching my life, identifying what mattered most to me, and then systematically taking it apart. The marriage was just the biggest target, but there had been smaller victories along the way. The promotion at work that she'd undermined by spreading concerns about my emotional stability. The friendship group she'd slowly turned against me, the confidence she'd eroded with years of subtle manipulation. Rachel confirmed my growing understanding when she called later that week. I've been thinking about what you said, about Lisa being jealous from the beginning. Do you remember Mark mentioning that she'd flirted with him before you two started dating? I didn't remember that, but it made perfect sense. Lisa had introduced us, but maybe her motives weren't as generous as I'd believed. Maybe she'd tried to interest Mark in herself first. And when that failed, she'd positioned herself to be close to whatever relationship developed. It was a long game. I told my therapist, Dr. Williams, during our next session. She wasn't just stealing my husband. She was stealing my entire life, piece by piece, relationship by relationship. Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. Some people can't tolerate other people's happiness. Instead of working to build their own fulfilling life, they focus on destroying what others have built. It's a form of psychological vampirism. They feed off the chaos and pain they create. The realization was both devastating and liberating. I hadn't been crazy or paranoid. I'd been targeted by someone who'd studied me for years, who knew exactly how to manipulate my trust and exploit my vulnerabilities. But I'd also been stronger than she'd anticipated. When the evidence finally became undeniable, I'd found the courage to expose the truth, even when it meant destroying the life I thought I'd been living. My therapy journal became my most trusted companion during those early months of rebuilding. Dr. Williams had suggested I write down my thoughts and feelings daily. Not just about the divorce and betrayal, but about rediscovering who I was without the constant manipulation I'd been living under. The first entries were raw, angry, full of self-doubt and recrimination. How could I have been so blind? Appeared on almost every page. What kind of person lets themselves be manipulated for years without realizing it? But gradually, the tone shifted. Dr. Williams helped me understand that being trusting wasn't a character flaw, it was actually a strength that had been exploited by people who lacked integrity. Lana, she said during one particularly difficult session, the problem wasn't that you trusted too much. The problem was that you trusted people who weren't trustworthy. There's a difference. Learning to trust my own instincts again was the hardest part. For years, every time I'd felt uncomfortable about something, Lisa had been there to explain it away, to make me doubt my perceptions. Now I had to rebuild confidence in my own judgment from the ground up. I started small. When a new coworker made a comment that felt subtly critical, instead of dismissing my reaction, I paid attention to it. When someone's story didn't quite add up, I allowed myself to notice the inconsistencies instead of automatically assuming I was being paranoid. The therapy helped me identify the red flags I'd missed or ignored in both Mark and Lisa's behavior. The love bombing, followed by subtle criticism. The isolation disguised as protection. The gaslighting that made me question my own memory and perceptions. Setting boundaries became my new superpower. When Mark's mother called asking if we could work things out for the sake of the family, I said no, clearly and kindly, but firmly. When former mutual friends suggested I was being too harsh on Lisa, I ended those conversations immediately. I don't need to justify my decisions to anyone, I wrote in my journal. I don't owe anyone forgiveness or reconciliation. I don't have to make other people comfortable with my choices. The most important boundary was with myself. I stopped apologizing for being hurt, stopped trying to minimize the impact of what had been done to me, stopped feeling guilty for exposing the truth. The shame I'd been carrying wasn't mine, it belonged to the people who'd chosen deception over honesty. Work became a refuge. My boss, who'd learned about the situation through office gossip, was incredibly supportive. She offered me the opportunity to lead a new client account, a challenge that required all my focus and creativity. Throwing myself into projects I was passionate about reminded me of my own competence and value. I also started saying no to things that didn't serve me. Social events where I felt obligated to explain my situation to curious acquaintances. Family gatherings where people wanted to discuss the divorce in uncomfortable detail. Conversations that centered around what I should do to move forward. Instead, I said yes to things that brought me joy or peace. Saturday morning yoga classes. Art museums on weekday afternoons. Books that transported me to different worlds. Cooking elaborate meals for one and enjoying every bite. The loneliness was real. But it was different from the isolation I'd felt while being manipulated. This was chosen solitude. Time to rediscover my own thoughts and preferences without someone else's agenda influencing them. I'm learning to like my own company, I told Dr. Williams. For the first time in years, my thoughts are just my thoughts. No one is telling me they're wrong or crazy or symptoms of some deeper problem. She smiled. That's not learning to like your own company, Lana. That's learning to be yourself again. Some days were harder than others, but each small step toward emotional independence felt like a victory worth celebrating. The coffee shop on 5th Street became my regular Saturday morning refuge. It was small, quiet, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of place where people came to read, work, or simply think without being bothered. I'd claimed a corner table by the window where I could watch the world go by while journaling or reading. It was there that I met Alina, a graphic designer who worked freelance and seemed to have the same Saturday routine I did. We'd exchanged polite smiles for weeks before she finally approached my table one morning. I hope this isn't weird, she said, holding her coffee cup nervously. But I've been wanting to tell you how much I admire your self-possession. You always look so centered, so comfortable being alone. I'm still learning that skill. Alina was recently divorced, too, but her story was different from Mina marriage that had simply grown apart rather than one destroyed by betrayal. We started meeting intentionally for coffee, then graduated to weekend hikes and occasional dinners. Her friendship felt clean, uncomplicated, based on genuine mutual interest rather than hidden agendas. You're different from my other friends, Alina told me one afternoon as we walked through the botanical gardens. You listen without trying to fix everything or offer unsolicited advice. You let people have their feelings without making it about you. I realized she was describing boundaries in action. The lessons I'd learned in therapy were changing how I related to people, making me a better friend while protecting my own emotional well-being. Through Alina, I met a small group of women who gathered monthly for dinner and conversation. They were all in their 30s and 40s, professionals who valued authenticity over drama. No one pushed for details about my divorce, but they were supportive when I chose to share. Most importantly, they demonstrated what healthy friendships looked like: mutual respect, genuine care, and the ability to disagree without attacking. Work relationships improved too. Without the constant stress of managing secrets and lies at home, I had more energy to invest in my professional development. I started attending industry conferences, joined a marketing professionals association, and even began mentoring younger colleagues. My confidence grew as I remembered what I was capable of when not being undermined. Dating was still off the table, but I was beginning to notice men again, not romantically, but as human beings worth knowing. David, the owner of my neighborhood bookstore, always had thoughtful book recommendations. Tom, the trainer at my gym, offered encouragement without being invasive. These low-stakes interactions helped me remember that not all men were like Mark. My relationship with Mark's family evolved into something unexpected but precious. Rachel and I had grown genuinely close, bonding over our shared experience of loving someone who'd disappointed us profoundly. Mark's parents invited me to family gatherings and holidays, making it clear that divorce papers couldn't dissolve the connections I'd built with them over 8 years. Your family, Mark's mother, told me firmly when I hesitated about accepting their Christmas invitation. What Mark did doesn't change that. We choose you. The new relationships in my life shared common characteristics that I was learning to value: consistency, honesty, respect for boundaries, and the ability to offer support without trying to control outcomes. People who celebrated my victories. without minimizing them? Who listened to my struggles without immediately offering solutions? Most importantly, I was developing a relationship with myself based on trust rather than doubt. I could rely on my own perceptions now, trust my instincts about people's character, set limits that protected my well-being without feeling guilty about disappointing others. The business card from the coffee shop sat on my refrigerator, a small reminder of how much my life had changed. From that first conversation with Lana, I'd built a network of genuine connections based on who I really was rather than who someone else wanted me to be. The news article appeared in the city's business journal 18 months after Lisa's resignation from Morrison & Associates. Lana showed it to me over coffee, her expression somewhere between satisfaction and concern. Former marketing executive charged with client fund misappropriation. Read the headline. The article detailed how Lisa's desperate financial situation had led her to increasingly risky behavior at her new job with a smaller agency. Facing mounting debts and unable to find stable employment, she'd begun diverting client payments to cover personal expenses. The scheme was discovered during a routine audit, the article explained. Chen had been with the company for only 8 months when discrepancies in client billing were identified. The total amount involved is estimated at $47,000. I felt a strange mixture of emotions reading about Lisa's continued downward spiral. Part of me felt vindicated. Her behavior at Morrison & Associates hadn't been an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of ethical compromises. But I also felt something that might have been sadness for the person she could have been if she'd chosen differently. Mark's situation was less dramatic, but equally consequential. Rachel kept me updated on his struggles, not out of malice but because I was still family to the Mitchells. And family shared information about each other's well-being. He'd lost his position at the consulting firm 6 months after our divorce, when his personal problems began affecting his work performance. The company had been understanding initially, offering counseling resources and flexible scheduling. But Mark seemed unable to focus on anything except his regret about our marriage. He keeps talking about what a mistake he made, Rachel told me during one of our regular lunch dates. Not just the affair, but letting Lisa manipulate him into it. He claims she pursued him aggressively, made him believe you were planning to leave him anyway. I wasn't sure how much of that was true and how much was Mark rewriting history to make himself feel better about his choices. But it didn't matter anymore. His version of events couldn't change what had actually happened or undo the damage that had been done. Mark's current job paid significantly less than his previous position, and he'd had to move to a smaller apartment across town. His social circle had largely disappeared. Our mutual friends had chosen sides, and most had chosen mine once the full scope of the deception became clear. He asked about you again, Rachel said carefully. Wanted to know if you were dating anyone, if you seemed happy. I told him you were thriving, but I didn't give him details. I hope that's okay. It's fine, I said, and meant it. I hope he finds peace, but his well-being isn't my responsibility anymore. The natural consequences of their choices had played out exactly as they should have. Lisa's pattern of manipulation and ethical compromises had eventually caught up with her in ways that couldn't be explained away or blamed on others. Mark's inability to take full responsibility for his actions had cost him professionally and personally. Meanwhile, my own life had flourished in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark months of discovery and confrontation. The promotion I'd received at work came with significant additional responsibilities and a salary increase that finally made homeownership possible again. The house I'd found was smaller than the one Mark and I had shared, but it was entirely no shared memories, no hidden secrets, no lies lurking in the corners. Justice, I realized, wasn't always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it was simply the natural result of living with integrity versus living with deception. Truth had a way of surfacing eventually, and character revealed itself over time. Both Lisa and Mark had shown who they really were when tested, and so had I. The new house keys felt substantial in my hand as I stood on the front porch of 847 Maple Street. 2 years had passed since that night I'd discovered the hotel receipts, since my world had shifted on its axis and revealed itself to be built on lies. Now I was holding the keys to a life that was entirely my own creation. The house was a 1920s craftsman bungalow with original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a kitchen that got morning light. It needed work, the bathroom tiles were outdated and the back deck required repairs, but every flaw was mine to address in my own time, according to my own vision. No compromises, no negotiations, no hidden agendas influencing decisions. Alina helped me move in, along with Rachel and a few other friends I'd made over the past year. We spent the day carrying boxes, assembling furniture, and hanging pictures. As afternoon faded into evening, we sat on the back deck sharing pizza and wine, laughing about my ambitious plans for a vegetable garden despite my complete lack of gardening experience. "You know what I love about this," Alina said, gesturing around the space. "It's completely you. Every choice, every detail reflects who you actually are, not who someone else thought you should be." She was right. The house felt like an extension of my personality in ways my previous home never had. The reading nook by the front window, the art studio I'd set up in the spare bedroom, the kitchen herb garden that might or might not survive my inexperience, all of it represented the person I'd become through surviving betrayal and rebuilding from scratch. My work with younger women had become increasingly important to me. Dr. Williams had connected me with a support group for people who'd experienced emotional manipulation and gaslighting in relationships. I'd started as a participant and gradually become a facilitator, helping others recognize the signs I'd missed for so long. The hardest part, I told a group of women during one of our monthly meetings, isn't the betrayal itself, it's learning to trust your own perceptions again when someone has systematically taught you to doubt them. One woman, newly separated from a husband who'd convinced her that her concerns about his behavior were symptoms of anxiety disorder, nodded with tears in her eyes. "I keep wondering if I'm being too dramatic, if I should try harder to make it work." "You're not being dramatic," I assured her. "Trust is a requirement, not a luxury. Without it, you don't have a relationship, you have a performance." The lessons I'd learned had crystallized into wisdom I could share. Red flags weren't suggestions to be ignored, they were information to be heeded. Healthy people didn't require you to doubt your own reality. Love didn't ask you to diminish yourself to accommodate someone else's deception. My phone rang as I was unpacking books in my new study. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Lana, it's Lisa." I hadn't heard from her directly since the night of the promotion party, though I'd followed her legal troubles through news reports and mutual acquaintances. The sound of her voice brought back a flood of memories, some good, some terrible, all complicated. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," she continued, "but I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the fake kind I've been giving everyone else." I sat down in my reading chair, looking out at the maple tree that had convinced me to buy this house. Its leaves were just beginning to turn gold. "I'm listening," I said simply. "I destroyed our friendship for reasons that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own insecurities and jealousy. I've been in therapy since the legal stuff started, and I'm finally understanding how toxic I became. How much I hurt you." Lisa's voice was different, smaller, less performative. Then I remembered. "I know this doesn't fix anything, and I'm not calling because I expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. You weren't paranoid or crazy or any of the things I tried to make you believe. You were seeing clearly, and I was the problem." I found myself crying, not from sadness but from a kind of relief I hadn't expected. Hearing her acknowledge the truth felt like the final piece of my healing falling into place. "Thank you for saying that," I told her. "It means more than you know. Are you doing okay?" She asked hesitantly. "I'm better than okay," I said, looking around my new home, thinking about my work, my friendships, the life I'd built on a foundation of truth rather than deception. "I'm happy." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time, processing the conversation. Lisa's apology didn't erase the damage she'd done, but it validated my experience in a way that felt healing. More importantly, it confirmed what I'd come to understand. The problem had never been me. The evening light was fading as I continued unpacking, creating space for books that reflected my interests rather than someone else's preferences. Philosophy texts sat next to romance novels, cookbooks next to memoirs by women who'd overcome difficult circumstances. My library was eclectic, honest, unapologetically mine. A text from Alina made me smile. "How does it feel to be home?" Home. The word carried different weight now. It wasn't just a physical space, but a state of being, the peace that came from living authentically. From being surrounded by people who valued truth over convenience. From trusting my own instincts, without apology. I responded, like I can finally breathe. As I prepared for bed in my new house, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The discovery of betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been liberation. It had forced me to examine every relationship, every assumption, every aspect of my life through the lens of truth rather than wishful thinking. I'd learned that strength wasn't about avoiding difficult situations. It was about facing them with integrity and courage. That healing wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about integrating the deeper experience into wisdom that could serve both myself and others. The woman who'd found those hotel receipts 2 years ago had been trusting to a fault, eager to please, willing to doubt herself rather than confront uncomfortable truths. The woman falling asleep in her own house, surrounded by her own choices, was different. Still kind, still capable of love and trust, but with boundaries that protected her well-being and instincts she honored rather than dismissed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new relationships to navigate, but tonight, I was exactly where I belonged in a life built on truth, surrounded by genuine love, answerable only to my own conscience and dreams. The keys to that life sat on my nightstand. Solid and real, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerge from the courage to end what was never real in the first place.